The envelope trembled in my hand only because I refused to. A woman my age learns to keep her face still when life decides to shake the table. But when I slid my thumb under that flap and saw $2 million sitting on a line with my name printed above it, something inside me went quiet. And then something else went cold. I didn't smile. I didn't gasp. I didn't even sit down. I just closed the envelope, pressed it flat against my chest, and told myself to breathe before the room noticed I had changed. My name is Carla O'Neill, and I learned a long time ago that money doesn't introduce you to people. It reveals them. I wasn't ready to be revealed to my own children, not after the slow way they'd been drifting from me, like I was a memory they didn't know how to hold anymore. The payout came from my husband's policy. He'd taken it out years ago, quiet and intentional, like every good thing he ever did. He used to tell me, "Carla, don't ever let folks spend your life for you. Keep something in your pocket they don't know about." I thought he meant loose change back then. Now I know he meant this. I slipped the envelope into the back of my dresser drawer, the one nobody touched but him, and walked out of the room with a straight back. I told myself I'd decide what to do with the money later. But a decision found me sooner than I expected. It happened that same evening. I was heading down the hall with a basket of towels when I heard Malcolm's voice drifting from the kitchen. He must have been on speaker, because Kendra's voice came right behind his, sharp, polished, and impatient the way only she can sound when she thinks I'm not listening. "Malcolm, she's getting too dependent," she was saying. "You know how she is, always needing something." Malcolm exhaled, like I had become a chore. "I know, but we can't keep juggling everything. At some point, somebody's going to have to talk to her about a facility. A nice one, but still. A facility. For me." They said it like I had already left the room. Like I was a task, a file to be moved. A woman who'd outlived her usefulness. The basket slipped a little in my hands, but I held it steady. I didn't step into the kitchen. I didn't ask them to explain themselves. I didn't say a single word. I just stood there long enough to hear Malcolm say, "We'll figure something out. She'll be fine once she's settled somewhere." Somewhere. That was the moment something in my chest hardened. Not anger, not revenge, just clarity. The kind that comes when you finally see a truth you've been refusing to name. I walked quietly back to my room, shut the door, and sat on the edge of my bed with my hands folded tight. They didn't know about the $2 million. They didn't know about the envelope. They didn't know anything except the version of me they decided was too heavy to carry. If you're listening to this part of my story, just drop a small heart in the comments so I know you're still with me. I looked at the calendar on my nightstand. A routine scan I'd been rescheduling for months was still circled in faint pencil. It wasn't urgent, wasn't dangerous, just one of those things older women are told to keep up with. But something about that date suddenly felt sharp. A scan required a caregiver to check me in and sign me out. There was also the $2,500 fee that wasn't covered. Small things. Ordinary things. Things children usually step up for. Unless they don't see you anymore. I reached for the calendar, pressed my thumb to the faint circle, and darkened it with slow, steady strokes. This would be my test. And the moment the pencil left the paper, I felt the shift begin. The morning after I circled that date, I ironed my blouse slow, letting the heat spread through the fabric the way I wished warmth still spread through my family. I didn't rush myself. I wanted my voice steady when I spoke to Malcolm. If there was one child I believed might show a shred of effort, it was him, the oldest, the one who used to run to the door when he heard my keys. I waited until he'd usually be on his lunch break before I called. He picked up on the third ring, sounding like a man trying to speed through his own life. "Ma, what's up?" "I'm in between things." Just like that. No softness, no breath, no moment to settle into the conversation. I kept my tone even. "I have a routine scan next Friday morning. They require someone to sign me in and out. And there's a fee I need help with." I paused long enough to take the sting out of it. "It's $2,500. There was a quick silence on his line, not the kind that holds concern, but the kind that holds annoyance. $2,500? He repeated, like the number was an inconvenience dropped onto his calendar. "Ma, that's a lot right now." I heard the faint tapping of his keyboard, a mouse clicking, papers shifting. His day was already louder than mine. "I just need someone to sit with me and get me home afterward." I added, "I can handle the rest." He sighed, and I felt the air between us stretch thin. "Ma, I can't take off work for that. We've got deadlines. And honestly, it's just a scan, right? Nothing big." Nothing big. The words settled on me with a weight I wasn't supposed to feel. I kept my face forward, even though he couldn't see me. "I understand," I said softly. He didn't hear the shift in my voice because he wasn't listening long enough to catch it. Someone called his name in the background. Another voice with more pull, more urgency, more worth than mine. "One SEC, he told me," then the line muffled. I heard him laughing lightly with whoever stood near him. The kind of laugh he used to save for family dinners. He came back on the line, already halfway gone. "Ma, I'll figure something out. Okay? I'm just really tied up. Let me call you back." But he didn't hang up fast enough. I heard it slip, bare, unfiltered, and careless. "My mom can't keep depending on me," he joked to someone near him. "She thinks I've got endless time." The person next to him chuckled, and Malcolm didn't correct them, didn't defend me, didn't soften it. He just let the moment sit. My hand tightened around the phone. Not in anger, not yet, but in recognition. The kind of recognition you don't want, but can't turn your face from once it finds you. He came back on the line like nothing happened. "Ma, you still there?" "I'm here." I didn't let my voice tremble. I didn't let that little moment reach through the phone and bruise me in front of him. "I'll call you later," he said again, as if repeating the promise made it true. "All right, baby," I answered, but as soon as I ended the call, I felt the truth settle in a place I couldn't ignore anymore. Malcolm hadn't even tried. Not a single step toward me. Not even the courtesy of pretending he cared enough to rearrange one afternoon. He saw me as weight. A clock he didn't want to check anymore. A responsibility he'd begun timing. I set the phone on my dresser, smoothed my blouse across my lap, and let the quiet lay across my shoulders like a shawl. The test had only just begun, and already the first line had been drawn. Malcolm didn't call me back that day, or that night, or the morning after. His silence answered everything for me long before his words ever tried to. By the time I pulled into Kendra's driveway the next afternoon, the sun had settled low enough to paint the house in that warm orange her husband liked to brag about whenever people complimented their porch. I sat in my car for a moment, letting the engine quiet down. I didn't want to carry the heaviness Malcolm left on me into her doorway. I needed to be steady, measured. I needed to see clearly. Kendra opened the door before I even finished knocking. Her smile was bright, perfect, and wide enough to count every tooth, but it didn't touch her eyes. It hadn't touched them in years. Mom, what a surprise. The word surprise had edges. I was in the area. I lied gently, thought I'd stop by. She stepped aside, motioning me in with her manicured hand. The house smelled like lavender and lemon polish, Kendra's version of order. She kept everything spotless, but Lord knows she let people in her life collect dust. Sit, she said, gesturing toward the love seat. She perched on the chair opposite me, crossing her legs slowly, like she was settling in for a short conversation she already planned to end. I didn't waste time. I'd already learned from Malcolm that dancing around a moment doesn't soften its truth. Kendra, I have an appointment next Friday, I said carefully. A routine scan. The kind where someone has to check me in and pick me up afterward. And there's a fee I need help covering, $2,500. Her smile flickered, but she held it in place like it was glued there. Oh, Mom, $2,500? That's unexpected. She reached for her phone and tapped the screen, not to check her calendar like someone processing responsibility, but like someone stalling for a polite exit. She scrolled casually, pretending to look at dates. Next Friday, she repeated. I'm actually traveling that weekend. A girl's trip. Booked it months ago. She didn't look up to see my face. She didn't ask what the scan was for. She didn't ask if I was all right. She just kept scrolling, thumb moving smooth and detached. It's not serious. I told her, giving her the benefit she refused to give me. Just something they say older women should keep up with. Oh, well then, she said lightly, you'll be fine. It's routine. You've always been good with stuff like that. Good with stuff like that. As if being alone was a skill. I watched her cross her legs the other way. A small movement. A silent shift of power. Kendra, I said quietly, they won't let me go alone. She finally looked at me, not with concern, but with inconvenience flickering through her eyes. Mom, you're making it sound bigger than it is. If it's routine, you'll manage. Just Uber there and back. It's not a big deal. Uber. A ride. A stranger. A moment she didn't want to give. My gaze drifted behind her, toward the photo wall. She'd rearranged it since my last visit. There used to be a picture of me right in the center, me holding her first baby the day he came home from the hospital. Now, that frame held an image of her with her friend Denise, both of them smiling on a beach. My spot was gone. Not moved. Not relocated. Erased. Kendra followed my eyes and straightened a pillow, pretending not to understand what I was noticing. I just need someone to check me in, I murmured. The words tasted tired. She stood. Conversation dismissed. Mom, just manage it. Please. I have a trip. And there it was, clean, simple, final. Not a question. Not a negotiation. Not a moment of thought. Just a door closing in a sentence. I nodded slowly and reached for my purse. My fingers were steady this time. Steadier than my feelings. All right, baby. Her smile returned, bright but empty. I walked out of her house with that smile floating behind me like a ribbon someone forgot to tie tight. The scan date on my calendar felt heavier with every step toward my car. I saved Daryl for last. Not because he was the most dependable, but because he was the softest, the kind of child who would lay his head on my arm long after he was grown, call me just to say he heard a song that reminded him of childhood, send me texts that read "Love you, Ma" out of nowhere. He was gentle in the way people can be when they've learned to wrap their excuses in sweetness. His apartment complex was quiet when I pulled in. I could see his car, see the lights on inside, hear faint music drifting through the open balcony door. I took the stairs slowly, steadying myself as I reached the top. He opened the door with a smile that looked warm until you looked deep enough to see it flicker at the edges. "Ma, you okay? You should have called first." "I was nearby," I said softly. "Thought I'd check on you." He stepped back to let me in, but his living room told a story, pillows neatly arranged, 2 glasses on the coffee table, a scent in the air that wasn't his. Something floral, feminine. I didn't comment. I didn't have to. He motioned for me to sit while he sank into the couch across from me, elbows resting on his knees. "So what's going on?" That tone again. Concern mixed with anticipation, like he was preparing to measure how much of himself he'd have to give. "I have a routine scan next Friday." I began calmly. "They require someone to check me in and pick me up. And there's a fee I need help with." His brow folded lightly. "Fee, $2,500. He exhaled the way people do when they're deciding how much of the truth they want to show. "Ma, next week?" "Yes, Friday morning." He rubbed his palms together like he was warming them, but really he was stalling, searching for a way to place his comfort above my need without sounding harsh. "Can you push it to next month?" he asked gently. "I got something going on next Friday." "What's going on?" I asked, voice steady. He smiled again, small, cautious. "Just plans. Nothing big, but I can't really move them." "Plans." I looked at the 2 glasses on the table. The floral scent, the way he kept glancing toward the hallway, like someone was just out of sight. "Daryl," I said quietly, "they won't let me come alone." He nodded slowly, as if agreeing with a statement he couldn't commit to. "Ma, you know I'd help if I could. You know that. But this timing is rough. Just push it forward. I'll go with you then. Promise." Promises never meant much coming from someone whose apologies always arrived easier than their actions. Before I could answer, his phone buzzed. He picked it up quickly, covering half the screen with his hand. "Give me 1 second," he murmured, already standing. He moved down the hallway, thinking he was far enough away, but the wall vent carried sound like a whisper sliding under a door. "Yeah, babe, it's just my mom," he said, voice soft and warm in a way I hadn't heard him use with me in years. "She'll leave soon. I'm learning to set boundaries. I can't let my family pull at me the way they used to." He chuckled lightly. "No, I didn't say no. I just guided her. You know what I mean? Guided. Boundaries. Family pulling at him. Words I never thought I'd hear wrapped around my name." I sat perfectly still on his couch, staring at the 2 glasses on the table. The room felt smaller, the air tighter, like his voice had reached into something inside me and turned a knob I'd kept untouched for a long time. He reappeared a moment later, smiling like nothing happened. "Well, Ma, you know I love you. I'll call you tonight. Okay?" "All right," I said softly. But when I walked out of his apartment, the floral scent followed me down the stairs like a reminder. And his promise, "I'll call tonight," floated behind me, light as dust. He didn't. The house felt different, when evening finally settled. Not quieter, just heavier, like walls know when something inside you shifts and decide to stand still with you. I moved from room to room without rushing, folding small things, straightening corners, wiping the counter even though it didn't need wiping. It was the kind of movement a woman makes when she doesn't want her mind to sit in one place too long. The sun dipped low outside my window, turning the sky a deep, bruised blue. That was the color I carried in my chest, quiet, controlled, but undeniable. Malcolm hadn't called. Kendra hadn't sent a follow-up text. Daryl's promise had dissolved into the same air he used to make it. All three of them had made their choices without ever saying the words out loud, and I had made mine. I pulled out a small overnight tote, not because I needed it, but because the act of preparing myself gave me a strength they didn't know how to give anymore. I placed a sweater inside, my wallet, a bottle of water, and the folder with my appointment papers. The total fee still sat bold at the bottom of the page. $2,500 due at check-in. I pressed the folder flat, not from worry, from resolve. The house dimmed as night thickened, and I finally sat on the edge of my bed, letting the day settle around me in quiet layers. My husband's old voicemail icon blinked at me from my phone, one I hadn't listened to in a long time. I tapped it gently, and his voice filled the room like he hadn't been gone a single day. "Carla," his tone was warm, steady, the same way he used to sound when he held my hands in his. "You make it too easy for folks to stand close to you. Watch who stays near when nothing benefits them. That's the real measure." The message ended, but the words didn't. They sank deeper than I expected, landing in the hollow place my children's choices had carved out over the last few days. I lay back against the pillows, letting the voicemail echo in my chest. My husband wasn't warning me about danger. He was warning me about truth. And tonight, truth sat at the foot of my bed like a shadow. A soft breeze nudged the curtains, carrying the scent of magnolias from the yard. It reminded me who I used to be, steady, rooted, not shaken so easily. The kind of woman who could hold her head steady while standing in a storm. I pulled the blanket over my legs and allowed myself one deep breath, slow and full, before I reached for my alarm clock. The appointment wasn't complicated. It wasn't life-altering, but it demanded presence none of my children could offer. Not because they were busy, but because they had stopped seeing me as someone worth showing up for. I wasn't angry anymore, just awake. The clock read 8:12 p.m., early for bedtime. But I didn't want tomorrow creeping up on me while the world was still moving fast outside my window. I changed into my nightgown, slipped under the covers, and let my thoughts settle in layers. Malcolm's rushed voice, Kendra's polished dismissal, Daryl's sweet-voiced excuses. 3 different notes, one song that played 2, clearly now. I reached over to my nightstand and pulled my calendar closer. The scanned date still sat circled in heavy pencil, the mark I'd darkened with full intention. My quiet test, my silent answer. My children would never know what this moment revealed about them, but I would, and that was enough. I pressed the button on my alarm and set it to 4:30 a.m., my finger lingering a second longer than usual. Not because I feared the morning, but because I had finally stopped fearing the truth. Morning came before the sun had the chance to color the sky, and I moved through it slow, steady, and alone. The routine scan sat on my calendar like a quiet reminder of everything my children had shown me without meaning to. But for now, all I needed to do was get through the last day before it. By afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Daryl's ex-wife, Maxine, asking if she could drop off a jacket their daughter left in my car last month. The timing felt harmless, ordinary even. I told her yes, to come by whenever she had time. But as fate would have it, she didn't come by. Her daughter did. I was folding towels on the couch when the little girl walked in, jacket draped over her arm, hair in neat twists. She talked fast, the way children do when they're excited to be helpful. Mom said to bring this. Grandma Carla. I smiled, smoothing her cheek. Thank you, baby. She plopped onto the couch beside me, her legs swinging. She talked about school, about a class project, about a drawing she wanted to show me next time. Then her tone changed, softer, thoughtful. Grandma, Daddy said you're going to the hospital tomorrow. My hands paused mid-fold. Oh, I said gently. She nodded, still busy swinging her legs. I heard him say it. He told someone on the phone you were going for some hospital thing, but he wasn't going 'cause he's busy. She didn't mean any harm. Children never do when they repeat what grown folks think they're whispering. What else you hear, sweetheart? I asked, keeping my voice steady. She shrugged. Daddy said you'll be fine. He said you can handle little things like that alone. Alone. The word nudged something in me I didn't want nudged anymore. I kissed the side of her head, thanked her again, and sent her back to her mother's car with a small bag of snacks. I watched her skip down the walkway, then drift into Maxine's passenger seat. I expected Maxine to wave and drive off, but she didn't. Her face changed when her daughter leaned over and whispered something to her. Her expression tightened, not with anger, but with concern, the deep, instinctive kind that wraps itself around a woman before she knows why. She stepped out of the car, walked toward me slowly. Carla, what's going on tomorrow? She asked softly. I hadn't planned to explain anything to her. I didn't want to pull her into the mess my children made when they stopped seeing me clearly, but the sincerity in her voice, it was familiar, the kind you don't hear often once life starts wearing people thin. It's just a routine scan, I said, pushing a smile I didn't feel. Nothing serious. So who's going with you? She asked it gently, no pressure, no judgment, just space for truth. I tried to brush it off. Let's not get into all that. She didn't step closer, but something in her eyes did. A memory lived there, one from years back during her marriage to Daryl, when he walked out after an argument and left her sobbing in my kitchen. I sat with her all night, rubbing her back, whispering that she wasn't alone even when she felt like it. I held her until she steadied. I didn't ask for anything in return. I saw that memory flicker behind her gaze now, warming into a kind of resolve I didn't expect. Carla, she said quietly, just tell me. The truth slipped out before I tried to shape it. No one's coming with me. Maxine's expression didn't change sharply, but something settled in her posture. Not pity, not shock. Purpose. She nodded once, slow and sure. Okay. She stepped backward, toward her car, lips pressed together like her mind was already moving faster than her words. I'll talk to you later, she murmured, but I saw it before she even reached the driver's door, the decision forming in her shoulders. She climbed inside, shut the door gently, and lifted her phone. My heart tugged in my chest. Maxine was dialing. My phone rang just after 7, the sky slipping into that soft blue that comes right before night settles. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of lukewarm tea, staring at the folded appointment papers like they held a conversation I needed to have with myself. I wasn't expecting anyone to call, least of all her. The screen lit up with Maxine. I blinked at her name, surprised by how it stirred something warm and cold in the same breath. We hadn't talked in a way that meant anything since the divorce. She'd always kept a respectful distance, the kind that forms when the marriage ends, but the bond doesn't completely die. I answered on the second ring, steadying my voice. "Hey, Maxine." She released a slow breath on the other end. "Carla, just checking on you." My throat tightened before I could protect it. I thought I'd hidden every trace of loneliness from the people who knew me, but something in her tone eased the guard I didn't realize I was still holding. I tried to keep my voice light. "I'm all right. I appreciate you calling." She didn't respond right away. There was a quiet pause, and I could almost picture her sitting in her small apartment, her daughter in the next room doing homework, evening news humming low on the TV. Her life had changed since Daryl. Calmer, softer, but I knew calm didn't always mean easy. "You sure?" she asked gently. "You sound tired." It wasn't the kind of question you dodge. Not with someone who has seen you cry into your dish towel while stirring a pot of stew after a long day. Not with someone who once held your shoulder while you held hers. I pressed my fingertips into the table's edge. "It's been a long week." Her breath caught again, not from shock, but recognition. I could hear the old closeness in it, that quiet thread that never really snapped, even after she and Daryl untangled their lives from each other. She spoke softly. "My daughter said something earlier, something about Daryl saying you had a hospital appointment tomorrow." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Silence told the part of the truth I didn't want to say out loud. Maxine exhaled, her voice lowering into a tender place she rarely let people hear. "Carla, you didn't tell me you had anything going on." "It's nothing serious," I said quickly, "just a routine scan. They make a big deal out of it for older women. I'll be fine." "You don't sound fine." Her words weren't sharp. They didn't carry accusation. They held observation, clean, simple, and real. The kind of statement that doesn't cut unless it's true. I rubbed my thumb along the side of the mug, tracing the small chipped edge. "It's just been a lot. That's all." Again, she didn't rush to fill the silence. And that alone softened something in me. So many people talk over your quiet. Maxine always knew how to let it breathe. "I didn't know you were going alone," she said finally. I closed my eyes for a moment. I wasn't planning to announce it. "I understand," she murmured. "People disappoint you enough times. You stop offering them the chance." Her voice carried familiarity, the kind shaped from nights when she sat on my kitchen floor crying while Daryl slept somewhere else. She had rebuilt herself since then, brick by brick, boundary by boundary. She once told me she felt like a stranger to her old life, but she missed the parts of it that had my name in them. The quiet stretched again, warm this time, like she was sitting across from me, even though she wasn't. She cleared her throat softly. "Carla, can I ask you something?" "Of course." Another pause, a careful breath, a shift from concern into something deeper, steadier. Then her voice settled into a tone that didn't wobble or falter. Carla, who's taking you? The phone felt warm against my ear, like it knew what I was about to say before I said it. Maxine's question lingered there, gentle, but firm enough to make the air around me tighten. Carla, who's taking you? I opened my mouth, trying to shape the truth into something softer, something that wouldn't make me sound forgotten. But loneliness has its own sound, and my voice carried it before I could hide it. Nobody, I whispered. There was no dramatic silence, no gasp from her end, just a subtle shift in her breathing, a deeper inhale, a measured exhale, the kind of reaction a woman gives when a bruise she'd healed from reopens in front of her. She didn't rush me. She didn't pity me. She just held the silence in place like a hand on my back. I swallowed. It's fine. Really. It's just routine. They make older folks jump through hoops, caregiver forms, signatures, fees. I'll manage. Maxine didn't answer right away. I could imagine her sitting at her kitchen counter, elbow resting on the edge, eyes narrowed the same way they did years ago when Daryl would come home late. She carried stillness in a way that made other people reveal themselves. Finally, she spoke. Carla, you raised a son who didn't know how to love me right, but you loved me like I belonged to you. Her voice trembled, but not from weakness, from memory. My chest tightened. She didn't have to say the rest, but I felt it hanging in the air between us. The nights I held her while she cried quietly into my shoulder, the mornings I cooked breakfast so she wouldn't have to face the day empty, the times I told Daryl quietly, she is doing the best she can, don't break her spirit. Maxine cleared her throat, soft but steady. I remember one night you told me a woman shouldn't have to beg for care. I never forgot that. She wasn't trying to make me emotional. She was naming a truth I had buried under the disappointment of the past week. I didn't want to bother you, I said, trying to steady my voice. You've got your daughter, your work, your life. I didn't want to add to your load. Her answer came without hesitation. You've never been a burden to me. Not once. The weight of that sentence slid into a place inside me that had been empty for days. A place my own children had walked past without seeing. I heard a chair scrape lightly on her end like she had stood up. Her voice lowered, not soft, but certain. What time do you need to be there? I hesitated, not because I didn't want her help, but because part of me still couldn't believe she was offering it so freely. Maxine. No, she said gently. Don't do that. Don't make excuses for people who didn't show up when you needed a moment of care. Her tone wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was protective. It reminded me of the day Daryl packed his things after their last fight and stormed out. Maxine sat on my porch, shaking and embarrassed, apologizing for things she didn't break. I held her hands and told her the truth she didn't want to hear. You deserve someone who sees you. And now she was giving that truth back to me. I pressed my fingertips against my eyes, steadying the sting. It's early, I murmured. Too early for anyone to be out. I'll be out, she said. Just tell me the time. The room felt too still, too open, the kind of quiet that comes right before something shifts permanently. My throat tightened. Maxine. Her voice softened into something that wrapped around me like a shawl. Tell me the time. Mama. The last word, Mama, didn't come from obligation. It came from loyalty, and it broke something open inside me I didn't know was still locked. I didn't sleep much after Maxine hung up. Not from worry, Something sturdier moved in my chest now, something steady enough to stand on. I didn't know what she planned to do, but I knew the tone she used when she said mama. It carried weight, purpose, a quiet promise that didn't need decoration. But while I lay in bed gathering myself for the morning, another part of this story was unfolding across town. Maxine told me later how she paced her living room that night, staring at the clock like time was daring her to sit still. She couldn't, not with my voice echoing in her mind the way it did. She grabbed her purse and left the apartment before the street lights even finished buzzing on. Her first stop was the diner where she picked up weekend shifts. The owner, a tired man with gray hair and soft eyes, looked at her like he already knew why she was there. "Need hours?" he asked. "I'll take whatever you got," she said. He put her behind the counter for the dinner rush. She worked faster than usual, moving with a quiet determination that didn't match the clatter of plates and voices around her. She made tips, not much, but enough to fold into the growing need inside her purse. After that shift, she didn't go home. She went to her car, turned the radio off, and pulled out a box from the back seat, small items she'd been meaning to sell online. She drove to the all-night pawn shop near the edge of town, the one with flickering lights and a bell that chimed like it was older than everything inside. The clerk looked at the jewelry she placed on the counter. A bracelet, a pair of earrings, a small charm her aunt gave her years ago. He didn't ask why she was selling them. He counted slowly, then slid the bills across the glass. She nodded, thanked him, and walked out without looking back. It still wasn't enough. So she did something she rarely allowed herself to do. She made 2 short calls to friends she trusted, not borrowing big amounts, just small pieces that added up. They didn't ask questions. They didn't shame her. They just sent what they could. By the time she pulled into her apartment parking lot, her legs were trembling from exhaustion, and her hands smelled faintly of diner coffee and lemon cleaner. But she didn't rest. She walked into her daughter's room, kissed her forehead, and sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, letting the quiet wash over her. Her daughter blinked awake. "Mom, you okay?" Maxine smoothed her hair. "Yeah, baby, I'm fine." The little girl sat up, eyes half open. "Is Grandma Carla okay?" The question hit Maxine straight, in a place she didn't know was waiting to be touched. She thought back, years ago, when that same little girl needed new school shoes, and Daryl was between jobs and excuses. I had shown up at their door with a bag in my hand and a smile on my face, pretending it was nothing, even though I knew it meant everything. Yes, Maxine remembered that moment. She remembered all of them. She tucked her daughter back in, turned off the light, and walked into the living room with a determination sharpened by memory. She emptied her purse on the kitchen table. Bills, coins, small notes folded from the hands that gave them. She smoothed every dollar, counted twice, then counted again to make sure the universe wasn't playing with her eyes. $2,500, the exact amount she needed, the amount my children didn't bother to consider, the amount she fought for like it was oxygen. She pressed her palm on the pile, releasing a long breath that carried every mile she'd traveled that night. Then she folded the money carefully, placed it in an envelope, and whispered to herself, "Carla won't walk in there alone." She stared at the envelope in her hands, jaw tightening with new purpose. And when she finished counting the last bill, she reached for her phone. The alarm hadn't even finished ringing when I swung my legs over the bed. My body moved on instinct, slow, but steady, while the world outside still slept. I washed my face, buttoned my blouse, and tied the same modest scarf around my neck that I always wore on early mornings. I wasn't nervous, just bracing myself for a day I expected to walk through alone. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't put on the TV. I didn't want any sound that would remind me of empty places in my life. I locked the door behind me and stepped outside into the dim blue haze of dawn, the street lamps still humming like they weren't ready to give the morning over just yet. I had only taken a few steps toward the curb when headlights swung around the corner. Slow, cautious, familiar. Maxine's car. I stopped. My breath followed. She pulled up beside me and rolled the window down. Her face softened by the early light, but sharpened with purpose. "You didn't think I'd let you come out here alone, did you?" she said. Her voice wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was steady in the way a person sounds when they've made a decision and won't be moved from it. I couldn't speak at first. I hadn't expected anything of this size, this weight, this presence. She'd beaten the sun to my house. The only person who thought my morning mattered was a woman no longer tied to my family by name, but tied to me by something harder to break. I exhaled slowly. "Maxine, it's barely 5. "Good," she said, unlocking the passenger door. "Early enough to do things right." The car heater hummed warm when I settled into the seat. She'd thought of everything, even the small blanket folded behind my legs. We drove in silence for a moment, not because there was nothing to say, but because the air between us felt full, like a peace I hadn't felt in days had finally found somewhere to sit. Halfway down my street, Mrs. Thompson, the neighbor who always watered her flowers before dawn, lifted her head and waved at our car. When she saw Maxine behind the wheel, her face brightened. "Oh, Carla, your daughter's taking you this morning?" she called out. Pain slipped beneath my ribs, quiet but sharp. I opened my mouth to correct her, but Maxine beat me to it. She leaned across the seat, smiling kindly. "I'm not her daughter," she said. "I'm just someone who cares." Mrs. Thompson nodded, embarrassed, but the word stuck to me long after we pulled away. Someone who cares. That was all I needed. All I needed, and more than my own children managed to offer. The hospital rose ahead of us, tall and pale against the brightening sky. Maxine parked close to the entrance and turned off the engine. She didn't rush. She didn't sigh. She didn't look tired from the night she'd spent working and scraping together the fee. She simply looked at me and said, "You ready?" I nodded, but truthfully, I wasn't ready for the feeling of being seen again. Inside, the lobby was cool and smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. A receptionist smiled at us, and Maxine stepped forward before I could even reach for my folder. "Appointment for Carla O'Neill," she said. Her tone was polite but firm, the kind women use when they have walked through enough disappointment to stand tall without asking permission. The receptionist typed quickly, then slid a clipboard across the counter. "Someone will need to sign as her caregiver for today," she said. Maxine didn't hesitate. She didn't look at me first. She didn't ask if I wanted her to. She didn't worry whether she was stepping too far into a place that wasn't hers. She picked up the pen, rested her hand on the form, and wrote her name with the kind of certainty only love, not blood, can offer. The pen clicked softly as she set it down. The ink dried in a line that would change everything. The waiting area felt colder than the lobby, the kind of cold that settles in the lining of your coat no matter how tightly you pull it around you. I chose a seat near the window while Maxine walked with the receptionist to finalize the check-in. I tried not to watch her, but my eyes followed her naturally, drawn to the quiet certainty in her movements. She didn't fidget. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look back at me for reassurance. She walked like someone who had decided her place before anyone else could question it. The receptionist tapped a few keys, nodded, and pulled out a printout. I saw Maxine lean in, listening closely. Then she reached into her purse, slow, steady, and pulled out the envelope I knew she'd spent all night filling. I didn't need to hear the amount. My heart already knew. She slid the envelope across the counter. The receptionist opened it, counted quickly, and her expression softened in a way that made something in my chest twist. She glanced over at me, not with pity, not with sympathy, but with a warm, knowing look. The kind women give each other when they see a bond that shouldn't exist, but does. I pretended to look at the window, but my reflection betrayed me. I saw my own eyes shift. I saw something crumble quietly. Maxine walked back toward me with measured steps, as if she didn't want to draw attention. She sat beside me, smoothing her jacket, the fatigue from her long night tucked neatly behind her posture. "All set," she said. Her voice was light, almost casual, but the weight of what she'd done pressed against my ribs. I stared down at my hands, folded together like they were hiding from the world. "Maxine," I murmured, not trusting my voice yet. She didn't let me continue. "Carla, it's fine." "It's not," I said quietly. She turned toward me, and her eyes, sharp, warm, steady, held mine without flinching. "You took care of me when Daryl wouldn't look me in the eye. You treated me like family when I wasn't sure I had any. Don't make this bigger than it is. I'm just returning something that was given to me first." Her words landed deeper than she realized. A nurse called my name, clipboard in hand, and we both rose. Maxine moved slightly ahead of me, adjusting her pace so I wouldn't feel the distance in our steps. She handed over the forms, answered the basic questions, and remained steady even as the nurse checked off each requirement. I watched her hands, the same hands that once clutched mine when she was breaking, and now they were signing, steady and sure. For me, we reached the small prep area where they needed to confirm a few final details before the scan. The nurse reviewed the payment section, stamped the file, and clipped it closed. "All right," she said with a small smile. "Everything's settled. We'll take good care of you." I nodded, but my throat tightened at the last word. Care. The thing my own children acted like was too heavy to carry. The thing Maxine gave without asking what she'd get in return. She walked me toward the curtained area, then paused when she saw my hand tremble slightly on the chair arm. "You okay?" she asked softly. I swallowed hard. "You didn't have to do all this." "Maybe not," she said, "but I wanted to." Her answer held no strain, no resentment, just truth, pure and solid. I opened my mouth again, but something pushed up into my chest, a mix of gratitude, disbelief, and the ache of being seen in a place my own blood refused to look. I reached for her hand. My fingers brushed hers. "Max," I began, but the words didn't form. My voice cracked before anything meaningful could leave my mouth. The world drifted back to me slowly, like someone was lowering a dimmer switch in reverse. Soft shapes, blurred edges, and the faint beep of a monitor pulled me out of the light sedation the scan required. My eyelids felt heavy, but not unpleasant, just the kind of weight that comes after a short, dreamless rest. I blinked until the ceiling sharpened. A nurse moved somewhere near my left side, her shoes whispering lightly against the floor. Voices murmured in the distance, steady, practiced, unbothered by the passing of time. But through the haze, one thing anchored me before anything else did. A silhouette, sitting, still, present, Maxine. She sat in the chair near the foot of the bed, legs crossed, purse in her lap, hands folded neatly, not sleeping, not scrolling her phone, just there, watching, waiting, ready the way only a woman with quiet strength can be. Something warm moved through my chest, not shock, not disbelief, just a settling, a realization that didn't rush, didn't announce itself, didn't need to be loud. She stayed. The nurse noticed my eyes opening fully and leaned in with a kind smile. "Welcome back, Ms. O'Neill." Everything went smoothly. I nodded slowly. My throat felt thick, but the room steadied around me. Maxine stood the moment she realized I was awake. "Hey," she said softly. "Take your time. No rush." Her voice was gentle, but the steadiness beneath it held me more firmly than any handrail or chair back could. The nurse checked my vitals, adjusting the cuff around my arm. She waited the whole time. The nurse said, tilting her head toward Maxine with a small smile, "Not many people do that for routine scans." The words slid into the space between us like a truth I wasn't prepared to confront out loud. Not many people, not for something routine, not when it didn't benefit them, but Maxine did. She did it like it was second nature. The nurse finished, gave me instructions for the next hour, and handed Maxine a small packet of papers to review. "Give us a moment, and we'll get her discharged," she said, then stepped out. The room dimmed again, but now in a comforting way. Maxine moved closer to the bed and rested her hand lightly on the railing, not touching me, just close enough to let her presence settle fully. Her eyes softened the way a woman's eyes do when she's seen too much to be easily moved but still chooses tenderness. "You doing okay?" she asked. "Yes," I whispered, though the word came out shakier than I intended. "You sure?" Her voice carried no pressure, just concern, clean, honest, uncomplicated. I let my gaze rest on her face, the faint tiredness under her eyes, the way her shoulders held both exhaustion and resolve, the small shake in her hands she tried to hide from me, probably from the long night she'd worked to gather the money. "Maxine," my voice trailed again. "You don't have to say anything," she murmured, reading the emotion I couldn't form into words. "I didn't come for that." Her words loosened something inside me, something tight and tense that had been building for days. I swallowed slowly, letting the warmth behind my ribs expand. The nurse returned to unhook the monitors, and Maxine stepped back just enough to give her room. When everything was cleared, she reached for my tote bag before I could even lift my hand toward it. "You ready?" she asked softly. I nodded, and she moved to my side, offering her arm, not because I needed help walking, but because help is what she chose to give. With steady steps, she guided me out of the small recovery room and into the hallway, her pace matching mine perfectly. The sliding doors ahead opened, letting a soft gust of morning air roll toward us. It smelled clean, bright, like a new beginning waiting outside the automatic glass. Just before we stepped through, Maxine leaned in, lowered her voice to something that wrapped around me like a promise. "Let's get you home," she whispered. The days after the scan passed, in a stillness that didn't belong to the world outside my window, it belonged to me. The house felt different now, not because anything had changed, but because I had. Maxine's loyalty had shifted the air in a way no candle, no breeze, no prayer could have done on its own. It settled into my bones like something steady and true. I moved slower on purpose that first morning, making breakfast without rushing, humming a tune my husband used to tap his foot to. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wait for anything. I let the quiet be what it was. Around noon, the phone rang. Malcolm. His name lit up the screen like a reminder I didn't ask for. "Hey, Ma," he said, cheerful, distracted. "Just checking in. You good?" I held the phone a moment longer than necessary before answering. "I'm all right." He didn't apologize. He didn't ask how the scan went. He didn't mention the promise he'd tossed into the air and let fall wherever it landed. He spoke like the previous days hadn't exposed anything between us. "That's good," he said. "I'll swing by next week. Or call. We'll figure it out." Figure what out? He didn't know I needed clarity anymore. He'd handed me that himself. "Okay, Malcolm," I said. My voice didn't rise or fall. It just sat there, even and polite, like someone standing in a doorway they no longer planned to step through. He went on about work, weekend plans, the errands he needed to run. I listened. Then he hung up without noticing the gap between us had widened past the point of repair. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed again. "Kendra." "Mom, hey, just checking on you. You're good, right?" I could picture her perfectly, walking around her kitchen island, tapping her nails on the marble counter, smiling into the phone because that's the face she always wore, even when her voice didn't match it. "I'm good," I told her. "That's great. I'm headed out with a friend. Wanted to make sure you weren't bored over there." Bored. Not alone. Not recovering. Not needing care. Just bored. "I'm fine, baby," I said. My tone remained calm. The same way a pond stays still even while the ground beneath it shifts. She didn't stay on long. She rarely did. Then came Daryl's call in the evening. He sounded tired, like guilt was something he'd swallowed but never fully digested. "Ma, everything okay?" "Yes." He waited for me to say more. I didn't. He cleared his throat. "I was going to stop by this weekend. If you need anything, let me know." He didn't say the words, "I'm sorry." He didn't ask what happened. He didn't offer what he withheld when it mattered. We ended the call on a note that didn't sound like love or anger. It sounded like distance finally becoming visible. By the time the house settled for the night, silence had become a companion I didn't fear anymore. I turned on the TV for background noise while folding a blanket, letting the glow wash over the living room. A segment on a talk show caught my attention, an expert discussing emotional elder neglect. Not the loud kind, not the violent kind, the quiet kind, the kind that looks like busyness, like polite distance, like grown children treating their parents like tasks. The kind my life had mirrored for a week straight. The host asked, "So what's the biggest sign someone is being emotionally neglected by their own family?" The expert didn't pause. "When a parent stops asking for help," she said, "because they already learned no one is coming." The words slipped into the room and settled in my lap like something soft but unbearably heavy. I turned off the TV, sat still, let the truth settle. Then I rose slowly, walked to my desk drawer, and pulled out a business card I hadn't touched in years, the lawyer my husband and I used for our estate paperwork. I stared at the number, not with anger, with clarity. Then I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. I set the chairs out that morning with a calmness I didn't entirely recognize. Slow, thoughtful movements, my mind clearer than it had been in years. The house felt still, almost watchful, like it understood the weight of what was about to happen. I brewed a pot of tea, not because anyone would drink it, but because rituals steady the hands when hearts are changing shape. By noon, all 3 of my children were at the door. Malcolm came in first, laughing into his phone, waving at me with a grin that didn't reach the parts of him that mattered. He gave a quick, distracted hug, already glancing around like he needed to measure how long he'd be here. Kendra walked in behind him, perfume strong, smile polished, sunglasses still perched on her head, as if she was ready to leave before she even sat down. Daryl arrived last, carrying a plastic bag with store-bought cookies like it was peace offering enough to erase a week's worth of silence. He kissed my cheek, soft and careful, his eyes darting around the room like he wasn't sure why it felt heavier than usual. They settled on the couch and chairs, joking with each other, filling the room with casual noise that didn't match the truth sitting quietly in my chest. "Ma, what's this about?" Malcolm asked, leaning back, legs stretched like he owned all the space in front of him. "Yeah," Kendra added, crossing her legs. "You said family talk. You okay?" I nodded slowly. "I'm fine." That was true in a way they didn't understand yet. They kept talking, teasing one another, tossing comments back and forth about work, errands, weekend plans. Their laughter rose and fell like background music. None of them sensed the shift coming. Then the front door opened. Maxine stepped inside. Everything in the room froze at once. Her presence sliced through the air, quiet, steady, unexpected. She wasn't dressed fancy, just simple and neat, her posture straight, her eyes soft as they found mine. But it wasn't her appearance that changed the room. It was the fact that she was there. Malcolm stopped mid-sentence. Kendra's smile dropped, the corners of her mouth tightening. Daryl's eyes widened, confusion blending with a guilt he tried to swallow too fast. Why is she here?" Kendra asked, the polite edge in her voice thinning by the second. Maxine didn't flinch. She stood near the door, with her hands clasped in front of her, not defensive, not apologetic, simply present. "I invited her," I said plainly. Malcolm shifted in his chair, sitting straighter, arms folding like he needed to shield himself from something he hadn't yet named. Daryl stared at the floor, jaw moving like he was chewing on words he didn't know how to fit together. I watched each of them closely, how their bodies moved, how their shoulders drew toward one another, forming a tight cluster on one side of the room. A silent alliance, a reflex, a habit. Meanwhile, Maxine remained exactly where she was, alone near the doorway, standing the way only a woman who has learned how to rely on herself stands. The distance between her and my children wasn't just physical. It was spiritual. It was moral. It was earned. The air thickened, and even the walls felt like they were leaning in. "Ma," Malcolm said, clearing his throat. "What's going on?" I walked to the dining table, my steps slow but grounded. My heart wasn't racing. My hands didn't shake. Every decision I'd made was sitting right there waiting for me to claim it. On the table, beside a small vase of lilies, lay a sealed envelope, thick, heavy, white. My children's eyes followed me. Maxine stayed still, silent, watching with a steadiness that held me up. I picked up the envelope, turned back toward them, and placed it gently on the table between us. The room held its breath. "This," I said, "is why we're here." And the envelope sat there like a storm no one saw coming. The room felt tight, the kind of tightness that settles in before truth gets spoken. My children stared at the envelope like it was ticking. Maxine stood near the door, still and steady, her presence a quiet anchor in a room full of shifting shadows. I sat down at the table. My fingers rested lightly on the envelope, the weight of it nothing compared to the weight of everything it held. Before I opened this, I began, my voice even, "I want to say something." All three of them straightened, as if preparing for news they believed they deserved. I looked at Malcolm first. His jaw tightened the way it always did when he braced for inconvenience. Then Kendra, arms folded, polished smile gone, her face unreadable. Then Daryl, who finally looked me in the eye for the first time since he arrived. "This past week didn't break me," I said quietly. "It revealed you." Their shoulders shifted, small movements, but sharp enough to slice through the room. I continued. "I asked each of you for something simple. Not money, not sacrifice, just presence. And you showed me exactly where I stand in your lives." Malcolm interrupted, voice quick, defensive. I held up my hand. "You had time to speak then. Let me speak now." Silence fell again, heavy and expectant. I opened the envelope slowly and pulled out the stack of documents inside, crisp papers, notarized stamps, signatures that changed everything. "This," I said, "is my updated estate plan." Kendra leaned forward. "Updated?" "Yes," I answered. "Updated after your father passed. And updated again after I realized what I needed to protect." Daryl swallowed hard. "Protect from what?" "From being alone," I said. "From being treated like weight you carry only when convenient." I placed the first document on the table. "This is the $2 million insurance payout your father left for me. I didn't tell you because I wanted to see you, not your expectations." Their eyes widened, shock, calculation, disbelief flashing across their faces in quiet waves. I lifted another document. "This details the actions each of you took and didn't take. The refusals, the excuses, the choices you made when I asked for a moment of care." Their expressions tightened. Kendra's lips pressed into a thin line, Malcolm's hands balled into fists. Daryl's gaze dropped to the floor. Then I placed the third document down, thicker, heavier. "And this," I said, "is the legal transfer of my home, accounts, valuables, and full estate benefits." Daryl leaned forward. What are you saying?" I turned toward Maxine. "She showed up," I said softly, "when none of you did." The room cracked open on that sentence. Shame crept into their eyes like something they didn't know how to hide. "She sat with me. She paid the fee. She stayed the entire time. She did what a daughter or son should have done." My voice held steady. "She carried me when my own blood stepped back." Maxine shook her head quickly, hands rising in protest. "Carla, no. I didn't do it for this. I don't want." I reached out, taking her hand before she could pull away. Her fingers trembled. "You don't get to refuse this," I said, locking her gaze. "You earned it without asking. That's the only way love should ever be rewarded." Kendra gasped. Malcolm muttered something under his breath. Daryl covered his face with both hands. I continued, placing the final page on the table. This is the no contact clause. It means if any of you reach out only for money or access, you forfeit the right to contact me altogether. They froze, breath caught in their throats. 3 grown adults realizing they had written their punishments with their own hands. The estate, I said, sliding the documents toward Maxine, goes to the woman who stood by me. Maxine looked at me, tears she didn't want to spill gathering in her eyes. Carla, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I murmured. Just stay. She squeezed my hand. I stood slowly, and she rose with me. Together, we walked to the door. My children didn't move. They sat stunned, surrounded by the silence they built. The sun outside was warm on my face. Maxine stepped beside me, steady as always. And as we walked into the light, leaving the house and the consequences behind us, I knew they finally understood. They hadn't just lost the money. They'd lost me.